Shad Khan may be a nice guy who never stole a freight train, who made billions of dollars. But again, it's the NFL letting people come in and own franchises who don't have a freaking clue what they're doing and then have to bounce around, make mistakes, screw up a fan base, take a franchise that should be doing a whole lot better and make a clown show out of it. I mean, yeah, maybe he's better now, but hey, Sam, Jaguars are a running joke. And I have friends of mine who go, hey, Ed, have you seen what's happening with the Jets and the Giants? I said, I hear it, but that's an entirely different story. The Jaguars should be better than this. And Khan is running a clown show in Jacksonville right now, and it shows no signs of ending anytime soon.
4 years ago, almost to the day, the Jaguars and the Patriots played for the AFC Championship, right to go to the Super Bowl. Jaguars got a bad call and didn't go. 4 years later, Patriots are back, still in the playoffs, still relevant. The Jaguars, as you said, are the bottom feeder once again in the league. So what happens to teams in that 4 year period where they can be so competitive and so good and then all of a sudden literally disappear from any discussions about relevant teams in the league? And it has to do with culture. It has to do with the owner finding people to run his franchise that create a culture that of accountability, of excellence, and of a certain kind of player that you want to represent you as the owner, the town, the team as a town, and the fan base. The Jaguars had that in the late 90s for a while. They had it in 2017, but they almost immediately dismantled that team after 2017. Calais Campbell was traded to Baltimore for a 5th-round pick. Mercedes Lewis was allowed to retire. To become a free agent, and still is an important part of what the Packers are doing. Paul Posluszny retired, and they didn't make much of an effort to keep him in the organization at all. Those 3 guys set the culture, and you've got to have a culture in order to have a winning franchise. Can you name the difference between James Harrison and Greg Lloyd? Well, absolutely not. They're the same player. I know they're different people, but they're the same kind of players. What kind of players are they? Steelers kind of players. When they drafted Hines Ward, we all went, Hines Ward doesn't have unbelievable physical talent, but he fit the culture of what the Steelers are doing. The Jaguars need to reestablish that, as any other losing franchise in any sport needs to do, is create that culture of accountability. And Khan has yet to do that, and he's the one who needs to take some.
Okay, and there's my point, perfectly hit. And you're dead on about the culture that you have to point out. Khan purchased this team on November the 29th, 2011, which means he has now had more than 10 years to run this franchise here. So, yeah, the Bucs got to stop with him, I think. But, Sam, you're so close to it. Who screwed up? I mean, you went over a bunch of great, but there has to be one person who screwed up. Was it just Khan? And again, I go right back to the fact that there are people who own franchises in professional sports who have no business owning a garbage company, who have no business owning a dollar store. Yet the NFL gives it to them because they're worth $9 billion.
Well, I think that, the buck stops with the guy that owns the place, because when they're going to trade Calais Campbell or not sign Mercedes Lewis, he has to sign off on it, even though it was Dave Caldwell as the general manager who did it.
Well, yeah, but that's just it. What if he doesn't know any better? He's just an owner. I don't know football players. I hire a guy to do that.
Well, I think he's smart enough to ask other people in the league, to ask the league itself, which has some opportunity to help owners do some things, certainly for the coaching search. But I think in the end, Shad's got to just look at himself and go, you know what, I've picked the wrong people, and I haven't allowed the right culture to develop. He tried to do that with Gus Bradley. That team, that collection of players, was too immature to be able to latch on to what Bradley was saying. And so consequently, when a player steps a quarter of a step back in his ability on the field, but he still is the guy in the locker room that everybody looks to because of the way he practices, how he acts in meeting, and how he conducts himself, you still got to pay that guy to keep that thread that runs through your franchise.
So let's go to culture then, Joey, because sitting there, you've got the Bucs. We've got another team that drives a culture. We've all seen this happen before.
Yep.
So when you look at this dumpster fire that has happened in Jacksonville, does the NFL not take some responsibility for this? for turning a valued franchise over to a billionaire because he's got more money than anybody else?
I'm sure the NFL is greatly concerned, and it really does remind me of the Bucks in another time, and so much time has passed that people may forget. But the Bucks arguably had the worst era of any NFL team ever, and we're not talking about the beginning when they lost their first 26 games. As we know, they actually got very good after that. They almost made the Super Bowl with Doug Williams, but when they elected to not re-sign Doug Williams beginning with the 1983 season, the Bucks went on a 14-season streak of losing seasons, and many of those were 2-14, 4-12, the absolute dregs of NFL teams that I've ever seen. And there was no way to imagine them getting any better. They were so bad. What happened? The ownership changed. Tony Dungy was hired as the head coach, and they did institute a culture of accountability, and they drafted a certain kind of player, a certain kind of person. And when that began to change, the on-field fortunes began to change. And certainly the Bucks have had some dips up and down since then, but since Tony Dungy took over in 1996, for the most part, the Bucks have been a very credible franchise, and they've won 2 Super Bowls.
Well, because
So, and
Dungy's
I
a
think
class
it goes
act.
back to culture.
I mean, Dungy's a class act,
Yeah,
right out of the box.
right.
So then that goes to, if you're going to start at the top, which is Shad Khan, and you take one step down, that's the guy on the field. This idiocy and this running dumpster fire of Urban Meyer. I got to tell you something, guys. It blows my mind. And Sam, we've talked about this many times. How
Best
in the
sale,
name of sweet?
best sale, and he worked on that. He worked on that from, let's see, he got hired in January or late 2020. He started work on that in late 2019 with Shad because he ran into him at a game and in Chicago because they're both kind of Illinois kind of Ohio kind of guys. And so he started the sales job then, and he did a tremendous sales job. I'll give Shad credit when he realized what was actually going on. He made a course correction and fired the guy, and that's exactly.
Yeah, but look how much damage has been done.
I know, but I can tell you that my gut feeling is that Shad has actually talked to Tony Dungy at this point, not about being a coach, but for advice, and that's the kind of sage advice that you need of how to build. And remember, Joey, only because Hugh Culverhouse is from Jacksonville, and I knew him pretty well. He was unwilling to spend a lot of free agent money, and that was an issue with the Bucks forever. But one thing that showed is that in any town, and it's true in Jacksonville, and it was true in Tampa Bay, there are about 40,000 people who are loyal and are going to go to games, regardless of how bad your franchise is and how poorly it's run. But once they got new owners, the Glazers were willing to spend money, and they brought in a guy who created a culture like Tony Dungy. And all of a sudden, the franchise has changed. Now, Shad has $71 million in free agent money available to spend, and the top draft pick. This should be a premier job in the league, right? With all that money and this kind of and a franchise player like Trevor Lawrence, who I think is a franchise kind of quarterback.
Yeah.
They've Josh Allen on defense, who is an all-pro potential kind of player. But you only got 2 of those. You need 5 or 6 to be competitive. I just think that the whole Trent Baalke thing is the GM, and that's you got several hundred fans who are really mad about that and are very vocal on social media. It'll be interesting to see how many actually show up with clown noses or clown uniforms Sunday at the game, the final home game against the Colts.
Always a guest appearance. Jordan.
No, hey, Ed, let me say one thing about the Jaguars. What Sam just laid out, the possibility of improving the team if they get the right person in. You're in a great city in Florida with no state income tax that might be attractive to players. I think the Jaguars could get good again. I don't think it would take that long. You just have to get the right people in place. So some people might say, "Oh my God, a dumpster fire, a clown show. There's no hope." I actually think there is hope. But like Sam said, it's a matter of getting the right people in place to make it happen.
So, George, to get away from the clown show, Sam brought up the great thing about culture, and we talked about that. Fans don't care. I mean, the fans don't care. The fans in Jacksonville are screaming they want to win. So how do you then take this? I mean, Khan's owned this team 10 years. I mean, how do you can't change a culture like that overnight, even though you have a pretty good kid in Joey Lawrence there. I mean, this to me seems like we're looking at another reclamation project that's going to take 2 years, maybe 3 years. And again, what a waste of time for the fans to have to pay that kind of money to go see a team that, quite frankly, could suck for a few more years. I mean, that's part of the culture, George.
Yeah, that's what. Hey, I live in Orlando. Remember the another sport called basketball, Orlando Magic. I don't know. This is rebuild number 5, 6, 7. I've lost count, but you can only do so much. And in terms of, you can say, I think that Khan is very much invested and cares, but there's a difference. You have to hire the right people. The Orlando Magic have not hired the right people. They hired a hockey guy to be GM at one point, for heaven's sakes. Jock Vaughn, a disaster. We could go on and on. You have to have the right people in place. He does not have the right people in place. And, the GM thing is obviously now also an issue that a certain, as Sam noted, a certain very vocal percentage of the fan base want him gone, along with Meyer. But there's a lot. You look at every city in the NFL, and there's a narrative there in terms of whether passion and caring translates into victories. You look at up the road a little bit there in Atlanta, where Arthur Blank truly cares about the team, but they've made mistakes. They made the Super Bowl, but certainly they've had some issues with being competitive on a regular basis. The team that they play on Sunday, the Colts, they had, remember Jim Irsay? He was a bit of a jerk. His son is very much committed.
A bit?
Not a bit.
A bit. All right. Maybe total clown show.
I'm a Baltimore native, so let's not. We don't have a
more. Yeah. So he was a complete jackass. But
okay.
the son, he is completely invested in that team. And has he made some hiring mistakes? Yeah, but they've made some pretty good picks. They had Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf. I think they made the right call there. So I think it all goes to, you have to have both in play. You have to have that commitment and passion. You also have to kind of put the right people in place to succeed. And in Jacksonville, that hasn't happened.
So let's take the next step then. Final question on this. We'll close things out. Who takes the job? I mean, okay, look, let's stop there. We all know that somebody's going to take this job. It's millions of dollars. It's an NFL coaching gig. Somebody's going to get the great opportunity to be the head coach of the Jaguars. Why the hell would you want it right now, especially when you're in a rebuild situation, Sam? I mean, this is not an attractive job at all, despite the fact that it's an NFL gig.
Because you have Trevor Lawrence, you have $71 million in free agent money, and if you're Doug Peterson, maybe they hired Jim Caldwell as the president of football operations. What they should do is put Tony Baselli in the organization, who can draw a line between the winning culture that they had into the early 2000s all the way to here. And you as the head coach would have to have the final say on personnel over Trent Baalke based on Baalke's track record. He can stay on as an evaluator and all that kind of stuff, but somebody else, I think, has got to have the final decision. And I think any head coach that comes here, if Baalke does stay, any head coach that comes here is going to have that final stamp of approval.
Who wants the gig then, George?
I don't know. There's some people in place now, but I don't know. It's probably will end up. I don't think they were going to go the recycled route. I think they'll go with offensive.
Well, they're not going to go college again. Obviously, You can't.
They'll go with an offensive or a defensive coordinator. Right. Yeah,
really,
and that's a logical pick.
That's a long shot. It's just a long shot because that's somebody who has no track record of creating a culture. I mean, you could get the offensive coordinator from New England. Does that mean he's going to bring Bill Belichick's culture with him? You don't know that. Peterson, Caldwell, guys like that have a have a proven track record of having done that. And besides that, Peterson played quarterback in the NFL. I mean, who better to look over the shoulder of Trevor Lawrence and help him out?
Yeah, I
So
tend
you
to think
think
that
Peterson's
Peterson be a
guy?
good choice.
Yeah. You think he's the guy, Sam?
Well, and we haven't talked about this, but if you're going to be the owner of an NFL franchise, you have a strong personality, right? I mean, you that's how you got to be who you
Pretty
are.
much.
Well, if you're going to be the head coach in the National Football League, you've got a strong personality. So the personalities have to mesh on some level. They don't have to be best friends, but they got to mesh on some level in order to do that. And I don't know, if Peterson and Khan have that meshing personality. That's Shad. I'll tell you this too. Shad's going to hire people, and he's going to keep people that he likes. That's the kind of guy he is. He's going to hire and keep people on the staff that he likes. And to tell you the truth, I hope they keep Darrell Bevel and Brian Schottenheimer as offensive coaches here to continue the thread along with Trevor Lawrence.
Anybody pop to the top of your head there, Joey?
I do like Doug Peterson. He's won a Super Bowl, former NFL quarterback. I think he'd be the right temperament, the right kind of guy to have in a Jacksonville situation. And again, I'll just say that it's not that bad of a deal. You've got, like's been said before, you've got Trevor Lawrence. You got a lot of money to spend. I think this thing could get back on its feet a lot sooner than people think.